Thank you so much for coming out tonight to Gallery Particulier. And my name is Justin. I am the co-director of the gallery, along with Arabella, and big shout out to Kiana, our gallery manager. All right, so, our gallery, the mission of the gallery is to create a space where art and community can help drive conversations, right? Particularly conversations that bring joy, happiness, and a sense of community. And so we're hoping to do that here with this space today through this exhibit, Gender, Euphoria, and Body Positivity. So with this specific show, we're hoping to uplift the artists here, the pieces that you can see on the wall, and the artists are challenging they're challenging societal norms, gender norms, as well as affirming and exploring identity. And I think also what they do is they help to remind us what liberation looks like, especially through representation and the bodies and people that you can see on the art on the walls here today. Again, I thank you so much for joining us here. I don't want to take too much time, but I want to introduce a model, advocate, curator. Thank you so much. Please welcome Racquel Chevremont.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. So I wasn't expecting to do this. I'm not. I'm a little bit of a shy person, actually. But Arabella and Justin asked if I would have a quick conversation, or more so, ask a question. So I wanted to hear from the artists how they felt their work fit in with the theme of the show. And what made you want to enter? And this is the first time I've ever curated something where it was a jury, selection. So it was a little different for me. And I don't know, have you ever entered into an exhibition in this way? You have. All right, so great.
I'd rather not, but I have.
So how do you feel your work enters into, or speaks to the gender euphoria?
My name is Ruben Natal-San Miguel, and to answer Racquel's question, in my case, my work started so out of therapy, and connection. I'm a September 11 survivor, and after I survived the September 11 attacks, I basically moved from my apartment on the West Side because everyone around me died. All the people that used to travel with me in the subway basically perished, and I used to see the windows being closed and people cleaning up apartments, and I'm like, I can't get away from this. So a friend of mine offered me an apartment in Harlem, and I'm there to this day. They'll probably bury me there, but I was collecting for photography at the moment, and I did talks with a lot of, I started being in the business, but then I started seeing a street life that I wanted to document. So I just picked up a camera with no absolute training at all, and I started photographing. And it kind of got serious, and I started showing, and I started selling, and I was just telling someone earlier that the last acquisition was the New York University Great Art Museum, and which they have my solo show tomorrow. And not to promote, but tomorrow have a talk and get free lunch. So if you want, I'll give you the link. Anyway, so I started this work as sort of a therapy for me to connect because I live in New York by myself and I really wanted that connection with people. But then I started realizing that the people that I photographed represented something for me and meant something to people. And then, I don't know, museums started calling and dealers started showing my work and I started getting press. And I said, okay, well, this is serious. So then I took it seriously and I went into it full time. And that's what I do till this day and probably the day I die. And, it's been a joyride. What I do is I find people, I walk, mostly. I walk. I've been known to walk for the Bronx, to the last place in the Bronx all the way to Harlem where I live. And I've walked all over this. I've walked the city in the last 23 years, completely. The 5 boroughs, and other cities as well. But for me, it's interesting to find that person that stands out in the crowd. And then going towards this work, specifically, for me, it was important to have representation in museums and galleries of people that are more in the marginalized communities in the city. And, you know, when I was making that work, they were not kind of seen as they are right now, and maybe even in a negative light. So, documenting them, and I made a purpose that I will always photograph that person when I find them. So those are real. I found everybody in those photos is exactly what I found them. The one with the brick wall, Alex, she represents herself as transgender, and she's on the wall of Muñeca Nails on Grand Concourse where Marc Jacobs gets his nails done. This I found out later on. I photographed it in 2023, but I just love that confidence of being who she is in an environment that really, you know, can be challenging. But then they're so comfortable in their own environment. So for me, I found out that it doesn't have to be pride, and it doesn't have to be like a gay event. These people navigate through the city very comfortable and, you know, with this confidence. And for me, that's my way to celebrate them. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm going to pass it to you now.
Okay.
So your work, which I don't know if everyone can see back there, hanging. What? I guess tell us a little bit about it and how you feel it fits with the theme of the exhibition.
I just want to say again that I think a lot of people are exploring this idea in, you know, museums and galleries and in their own work, but I honestly feel like someone of my generation looks at it maybe a little differently. Growing up in the 1970s, free to be you and me, you know.
You're much younger than that.
No,
Okay.
well, you look gorgeous. Age is not a thing. Beautiful people like you. But I guess I grew up the daughter of a pianist, a classical pianist and an artist. And to me, gay, the categories in my brain, you know, were gay and straight and maybe bi. But I grew up amongst artists and musicians. I didn't really think of gender in a hierarchical way or sexual orientation in a hierarchical way. I grew up in New York City. And then it wasn't until later, you know, much later, teaching art history courses and classes on race and identity in American art at Tyler School of Art and at other colleges and universities, that I realized that many people, you know, hadn't really thought about the complexity and the personal aspect of gender and sexuality until adulthood. College, in a very privileged kind of way, you know, that they were in a class and they could talk about their thoughts and opinions and, you know, amongst artists and other people. So I just realized that I was in a kind of minority in the way I looked at the world. And I've been attracted in my own life to people who are different than me, you know, in my relationships. So I like work my work is all about celebrating the beauty of difference and different perspectives. So I've been exploring cyanotype photography, but from a more painterly perspective, coming from a background in printmaking and painting and only branching out into cyanotype once I realized it was so much like natural indigo dye that I fell in love with. You know, working at the fabric workshop and museum and exploring that process. And I love to walk as well. You know, like I'm physical.
The wheel walkers.
Yeah, walkers, and I dance, and I know Arabella from Pat Hall's amazing dance class at Mark Morris Dance Studio, and I worked with one of the dancers who you know, Sheila Anosier, for her eyes, and we've collaborated for many years now, actually. Other eyes in there, my eyes, my son's eye, Eyes, I think Elliot was reminding me that, eyes are the windows to the soul, but they also can represent things as symbols. They can represent judgment, they can represent our vulnerability, and the way in which we see ourselves is always changing throughout our lives. So we live in this very binary time, a very polarized time. I don't want to be in that confine. I want to, bust out of that. And so the freedom of the body, and that's something you mentioned, Justin, is really important in my work. The physical gesture, I always have my body somehow in the work. So for this piece, I used multiple processes, and it was funny, looking at the Man Ray exhibition at the Met was really, kind of resonant for me, because he approached photography in this very experimental, painterly way that we know of, because it's like mark making, really. It becomes very abstract. So I worked with negatives of eyes. I painted onto some of those negatives. I worked with my own body, laying on top of sheets of glass with the negatives. And then I also used objects. So there's photograms, like the body blocking the sun. There's chains, which are kind of, stamping out the chains, holding us down. There's plant life, and there's fish eggs, which came about through working with a scientist's image for Olympus Bioscapes competition with Olympus camera. And it's a double-sided piece. So if anyone wants to buy it, they have two for the price of one.
I was trying to figure out if there was a way we could hang it here so we could see both sides. But
it's hard, it's a small space, you can't. But anyone, who's curious, you can see both sides in the catalog. I like having that aspect of the surprise of what's behind as well. And
your hand is in it, right?
My hand with the brushstroke is in it, yeah. So after I did the exposure, I used hydrogen peroxide, which can be used in different ways with cyanotype. It can boost the contrast of the blue and the white, but you can also remove the imagery that way. So it's an unforgiving thing. You either, like it or you don't like it. I've done other things with cyanotype recently. I've been embroidering, doing woodblock printing. I painted onto it. So I think of it as a very, as part of the multidisciplinary way that I like to work. But the idea of, in this piece, the idea of gender is also about women's rights to choose. Thinking about fertility in metaphorical ways through this idea of eggs, but also thinking about that fertility is a way in which we contribute our ideas to the world. We enrich, hopefully, the world with what we can give, lovingly, hopefully, in different ways. So I did a whole bunch of works where I used these violent-looking implements about, almost like attacking the female body. And having chains and these big tools like clippers, for foliage and stuff. But this piece, I feel like, is very much about freedom and fertility and a generative kind of energy that I bring to most of my work. And
it's beautiful.
I'm grateful for this chance.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And in my paintings, I'm like building the world that I want to live in. And so it started with thinking about space, right? I grew up in New York City, in an apartment. And so when I started painting, what I was painting was like access to nature, and it was big open spaces and big open skies and cities that could inhabit that sort of access and that space for people. But as an extension of thinking about the world I want to live in, my paintings became more explicitly queer, right? Like in my own life, exploring my own gender nonconformity and very much building, my own little queer community that really showed through in my paintings. And so a lot of the people who are represented are friends. And I'm thinking about, the comfortable lives that I think we all want to have, and being able to represent that comfort. So that's a lot of what I'm thinking about.
Beautiful.
Sorry, because I'm French and I have a strong accent. So, but I work with living things. So this piece is made of mycelium, which is the mushroom roots. So all the white you see are the mushrooms tidying everything together, and I experimented with the technique of ink transfer on the mycelium, which worked. And the whole point of that was that I was remembering, so I just became a mother, and I was remembering the time when I grew up in the south of France where genders were really, strong. I think I never saw even a gay person where I grew up in a small village, and then I was a tomboy, and I really felt really unchained in my female identity. And I saw this photograph of me holding this duck, in the farm of my grandparents, and I was very strong. I was like, wow, I don't even know if I could hold this duck now. This little girl really knew how to, get stuff and be a tomboy, and that was it. And so I was thinking, how can I use this to show that biology is, of course, here, but there is a bigger sense of freedom to it. And, all living things are much more interconnected and much more than just what we human say they are. And mushroom is one of the oldest living thing on earth. So I used that technique to experiment. And the feeling I wanted to give is kind of this archaeological feeling of, our gender and just our person as humans come from such a long history of changes, and that's just that idea gives me a sense of freedom. I come from much more than what society tells me, just even biologically speaking, and so that's where this piece comes from.
Right, and the use of the mycelium, because mushrooms, the way they move underground, a lot of what's happening you don't actually see.
Exactly, yeah. So the mycelium is just the root systems, and mushrooms are just the flowers, in a sense.
Yeah.
And so the way I use it is a farm of states grows them with hemp, and they send it to me dry, and I revive it with flour and water. And then I used molds, and I used a printed version of the photograph, and then I let it grow with the printed version on it. And 10 days
That's
later,
the part I wanted to get into, is the process of it, because I found that fascinating. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but continue.
No, that's it. And then 10 days later, the mushroom did its work, and so it was a collaboration with this nice mushroom. Who is still, I think, a little, right now it's dormant. And because it's framed, it won't change. But if I were to take it and put it somewhere very dark and very humid, maybe it would go back to life.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Really interesting.
So,
Thank you. Okay, well, I think that's it.
Noah has quotes to French painters from around 1900. And so I really enjoy Noah bringing that, in a more contemporary and more very interesting work around gender. And I have really a detail, it's a small detail, but I think that there's a quote of a Manet painting, right, with the bar woman, barmaid, except there it's a man. And what is in the painting, in the Manet painting, it's a mirror, right? And there it's a painting, and I was wondering what the painting is.
There we go.
So you're
Someone who knows her art history.
totally was inspired by the bar de Folie Bergère, which is what you're referencing, and also Toulouse Lautrec. But I think in general, I was really inspired by, Art Nouveau aesthetics and Art Nouveau spaces. The painting in the background is not anything in particular. I think it was inspired by Art Nouveau kind of paintings of nymphs. So women in nature is sort of a running theme, especially among Art Nouveau artwork. And that connects to other paintings, like my friend Boaz in the Park is directly inspired by that sort of tradition and in that expansion of gender norms.
Boaz, before I ask this, is Boaz a man? Does he identify as one?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, gender non-conforming. So, yeah.
Justin?
A question I had about what looked like twins.
They're twins.
Do you have more about this? Because they look like different personalities.
They're identical twins. What happened is that what they do is that they wear the same color, and then they wear the makeup and the hair differently. So that's kind of that's why I became fascinated with them, because they're twins and they're so together. They're very, like most twins are, but yet they have that sense of own persona by doing that.
How did you run into them, or what's the story behind?
I ran into them right before the pandemic started. I ran into them in Embodiment Harlem because Nikki, the one on the left, which I photographed first, lives in this house. So I was able to connect with Nikki, and there's a photo of her that's pretty known, that is her in front of her laundromat where she grew up. It's this psychedelic color laundromat that they've been in a couple of areas in the Bronx and Brooklyn and in Harlem. And she just happened to be the laundromat that she used to always, she lived around the corner from it. So I photographed her there. And then when the pandemic went into 2020, 2021, Ari was living in East New York, and she was completely, within the pandemic, they were completely kind of isolated. So then Ari moved to the Bronx, and she told me she moved, and she was kind of ready, because I'm the first person that ever photographed her, period. And I photographed her, and that's the corner of the building, where she is on 156 and Melrose Avenue in the Bronx. I don't know, most of my work, I have the temperature, the time, the date, and the location. I want people to feel what I felt when I was doing that work. For me, it's very important to have a timestamp. I've been doing this for 24 years. Don't ask me why, but you know what? It's helped me a lot, because I remember, and I could talk about the work by that, I really could talk about most of my photographs that way. I even know the day of that, when that photo was taken. So
That's awesome.
yeah, and then one of them, unfortunately, her husband just passed away. Nikki was married for 15 years. So, just to prove that these people have lives, you know what I mean? They have lives. And Ariana was the manager, a main manager at this store, what's the name of that store? Jesus Christ, was it Zara? Mm-hmm. So, when I met them, they have, they have their lives together, and I haven't photographed them. We were supposed to photograph recently because obviously since 2021, and now, they're going through the transitional process, and I've been respectful. And then Nikki's husband passed away, and so I'm giving them a little space, but they're like family for me. And to have them in a billboard in Los Angeles that won a competition on Melrose Avenue, to have them in the climate change flag project at the Rockefeller Center. So we have celebrated a lot, and they're in 6 museums. So they're they're right now at the National Museum in North Carolina, the 20th anniversary exhibition. And it's a big photo, it's 30 by 30. You know, I'm sorry, I apologize for the size of the photos. My work is big, it's just it's just very, you know, well, you've seen it, it's very strong, you know, and I just, you know, I tend to be a little bit more on the shy side, and
This is the smallest I've ever seen them printed.
yeah, because that's how I start. I start small.
Ah.
I do it this bit small, and then I go large. You know, it's just part of the process. You know, because to do something that large, and it's like, oh boy, I saw something that I didn't like, or the printing process. So, and actually, I was telling Racquel that I couldn't do the large ones because they're kind of on hold for a museum. Sorry.
I mean, the scale, this intimate scale is it's great. You really it draws you in. But the larger scale command a room. They completely command a space.
The Mama Beautiful Skin, which I took in 2017, and that's an Aries wagon that I found her. When I turned the corner, I almost got mugged. So I kicked the guy in the arm and threw the knife, and I turned the corner because I was working in the Bronx. I was in Holmes Point. Turned the corner and I hear somebody saying, "Mister, take my photo," and there she was. And I had my eyes in the fire, hadn't seen because I've been doing those for as long as I've been around. And but then I stopped and I'm like, oh no, I said absolutely. So there's only one file. That's one photo. That's it. So I was trying to give her a file, and then unfortunately, people who live at the margins of life. She was in a women's shelter. I couldn't even go in the area. I almost got beat up by a gang. Listen, I'm fearless. So.
That was just one shot.
The one shot, yeah. I do 1 or 2 shots. That's another thing about me. I'm a trained architect. I'm very specific. I know what I like to do. And I take 1 or 2 shots and I'm like, I don't need 50. I'll be bored, I'll be miserable, I don't like to edit. If I get it, I get it. And I move on. That's how I do my work. It's very precise because I do too much work. And I can't have 500 images or something that it's just not. It's the same person, maybe with the eyebrow a little bit higher, So I think that's it's like a perfect moment. And she's hanging right now still at the Mint Museum in North Carolina, right next to Keehandi Wiley, a big painting of Keehandi Wiley. But that one is big because it's framed and it's like almost 40 by 50 when it's all framed. And it's been hanging there, and I held her series.
The power of art,
and
power of representation.
And there was a person, a daughter. I was telling Arabella that there was a daughter of this lady that she was born with deformities, and she was never outside. And she's also from North Carolina. And when the daughter was dying, her mother chose to that last 2 weeks, to take her around. She took her to the Mint Museum, and she fell in love with that photo. She had a photo taken with it. It was in People magazine. Obama tweeted the photo. So, yeah, that photo has a long, legacy. So, I'm very grateful.
If only you could find her again. That if she...
I know she moved to Harlem. So one of these days I'm going to run into her. But the time that I had the photo in my hands to give it to her, it was the same size. I was confronted by a gang. I was told that I couldn't even go in the women's shelter thing. Everybody in life goes through hard times, and and they come around, and I have to check with Alex because I don't know what she's been doing now because it's been 2 years, and I always check on them. Some of them are my friends. I photograph them over the years again. They're like my found family.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
So I noticed when you were all speaking about your work that there's an element of chance that is really very important to all of your processes. And of course, being together, there's a new element of chance with everything being installed and related to each other. And I was wondering if maybe each of you can answer this quickly, but is there something you've discovered about your own work, seeing it in relation to this show?
And my guess will be resistance. I think that by doing this work and putting it out there and doing every hustle I can to make it go into a museum, which I do shamelessly, for me to elevate everyday people is very important.
Yeah, I think the spontaneity of making work is the joy for me. Like I wouldn't do it if I knew what it was going to look like. It would be boring, So, but I think there's some interesting conversations the way you put the show together and the selection. The idea of portraiture is a thread that I see in these works, and intimacy as well, like portraits in a loving way of someone that you know, or different aspects of beauty, and the kind of pushback, that we want to push back against the brainwashing and the constructs that we're, like perpetually fed, even more with the social media kind of pervasiveness now. So I like that I'm doing portraiture and oil painting, I'm doing photographic kind of investigations, and I like that there's a kind of fantasy aspect as well to like the idea of the utopian world that we want to see, where all these different kinds of beauty can be celebrated and participatory. We can all be a part of that vision together.
I think I really resonated with how you framed, just like thinking about the normal lives of queer people, I think is so special to think about, like outside of any sort of event or outside of Pride Month or something, but just thinking about regular lives. And I think, this is touched on also with, we have like also these like out of context body parts that are so, I don't know, touching. Like I think we all like explore that element of humanness. Yeah,
no, I agree. And she's also an artist in the show, so spoiler alert for the next part. But we were talking before about how, we like to experiment and let also the thing grow by itself. And I think when you show it, it's exactly the same feeling. When I arrived and I saw it, I felt, oh, we found a home now. And then I saw these beautiful portraits and forms, and I was really feeling that it was part of something different. And this piece went to Hong Kong and in another gallery in New York, and every time you see it differently. And then I transformed it into an installation also in Hong Kong. And so, yeah, I totally agree with what you said beautifully. But yeah, it's really important to see it through the eyes of other people once you made it, I guess. Yeah.
And I'd like to add something. Germán Vázquez is not able to be here today. He's the artist who made these, and he's both on the labels, and these take you to interviews of the artist. So it's very interesting, for example, that piece, what he says about it. This is like a reimagining of the Mona Lisa with the trans from Le Guardian. This is a reimagining of the birth of Venus revolution. And it's also on our YouTube channel, Gallery Particulier. So if you don't want to watch them now, you can watch them later. This is very interesting. It's about El Velo is about people being expropriated because of gentrification and tourism in Puerto Rico.
All of our storytellings are, against the backdrop of the art that we have on the walls. So the last storytelling that we had last Wednesday was the closing of a previous show. This one, obviously we haven't come up with a title yet, but we hope that you can come speak through this art, speak through your experience, and we'd love to see you there. Thank you so much. Hope you get to mingle. One of the questions, if you want to reach out, speak with Racquel, one of the things that I was really interested in, is like the art, like the curatory, or like how you curated the work. I curated my first show this year.
Oh, congratulations.
And when we hung the work, I learned so much from you, and I was wondering if you could just share, one thing about the curatorial process. Sorry to put you on the spot like that.
One thing. Oh gosh. There's so many things. Well, I think at first I start with, if we're going to talk about how I start curating, I look for a theme. I come up with a theme. This time it was given to me, and we were lucky enough to have received so many incredible submissions. When it comes to hanging, which is what I think that you're really speaking to when we were hanging the show, I just try to hang the work so that it's in conversation with other pieces in its space, right? And also so that the works are also speaking to each other. So I don't like to have works looking into corners at no one, right? So that's important to me. And the size of the work and trying to make it so that when we looked and saw, because I was like, oh my gosh, they're so much smaller than I'm used to seeing your work. But then, looking at the space, I wanted to create a very intimate, space so that you can be with those images so that they wouldn't get swallowed up by the walls or anything. So that's the other thing I look for, is to try to put the work in locations so that they have their room to breathe, or invite someone in to really live with the work. No, it was great working together.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Racquel.
Yeah.
Woo, thank you.